The cold wind was like a knife, scraping the yellow sand on the border and rolling up a biting chill. Yuchen stood outside the camp, wearing a broken black squid, and his eyes coldly swept across the skyline far away. At the age of 18, he still carries a few young people's grin on his face, but his eyes seemed to have been tempered by ice, and there was a coldness that was inconsistent with his age. This was not the first time he had come to this deserted land, but this time, he knew that he could not go back to the capital. At least, he could not go back until he passed this dead emperor's trial. "Your Highness, you have a big wind, come in." A rough Hanzi beside him said softly. This is his bodyguard to protect the Iron Mountain, loyal and rough, and he always goes straight to the point. Yuchen ignored him, but narrowed his eyes slightly and stared at the conceivable rebel camp far away. The first priority of the emperor's trial was the rebels on the border, which sounded simple, but everyone knew that the rebels here were not ordinary people of Yuhe. There are big men behind them who are stolen, and some veterans in the court secretly communicate with each other. Otherwise, where did the scoundrel openly rebel? "Xishan, do you think this test is testing me, or is you forcing me to die?" Yuchen finally opened his mouth, his voice low and mocking. Xishan was stunned for a moment, slapped his head, and smiled silly. "Your Highness, don't think too much. Which prince doesn't live with this situation in our Great Yan Dynasty? You are the prince, and this is your life, and no one can change it." "Life?" A sneer was pulled out from the corner of Xiao Yuchen's mouth. No one has ever seen his identity as a prince since he was young. The mother died early, the father was unaware of him, and the ministers in the court even considered him an unnecessary deception. If it weren't for the rules of this emperor's trial, every prince would have participated, and he would probably not be able to step in this border, and would be thrown into a remote fiefdom and be self-destructive. But he didn't want to die. He wanted to go back alive, return to the Golden Palace, and tell those who looked down on him that he was not a waste. A quick shout broke his thoughts. A scout with a slutty body ran over and knelt on his knees, panting, saying, "Your Highness, the rebels are calm. They seem to be gathering their troops, and they are expected to launch an attack tonight or tomorrow morning." Yuchen glanced at the scout with a brow and turned around and looked at the scout. "How many people are there?" "At least 3,000 people, well equipped, and many soldiers." The scout lowered his head and returned, with a tight slit in his voice. 3,000 people. Yuchen murmured in a low voice, his eyes turned to the distance again. His subordinates had only 1,000 people, and the raided soldiers brought from the capital. Their fighting power was quite different, and their military power was even lower. He had no choice but to do the rebels, with familiar terrain and sufficient supplements, and there were also hardcore soldiers like the ones who fought head-on. "Your Highness, why don't we retreat first? Holding the black stone gate behind can delay at least a few days and wait for the aid troops." Xishan tried to open his mouth, but was cut off by a cold eye by Yuchen. "Retreat?" Yuchen snorted coldly. "Where to retreat? The first thing in this trial is that if even the rebels cannot be suppressed, what kind of emperor and domineering business should I talk about? Xishan, remember, there is no way out since I set foot on this land." Xishan blew his mouth and finally said nothing. He followed Xiao Yuchen for many years and knew the master's temper. He said the same thing, and no one could hold on to the decision. "Send the order, the entire army is ready, and you won't sleep tonight." Yuchen turned around and walked into the camp, his voice as cold as ice. "I want to see how big a lie this rebel army is, and dare to act wildly in front of me." The night was getting deeper, and bonfires were lit in the campground. Soldiers sat together, whispering to discuss the coming battle. Xiao Yuchen sat in the main account, opened a rough map in front of him, his fingers slid slowly on it, and his brain was flying and calculating the countermeasures. He knew that fighting hard was impossible, and the only goal was to defeat Surprise. But the terrain of this border is complex and the rebels are crowded. How can we find their destruction? "Your Highness, someone asks for it." The sudden sound of the Iron Mountain outside the bank was heard. Yuchen raised his head and said with a brow, "Who? Are you still here to go?" "I am a man who has his own surname and said he has something important to tell me." Yushan replied, with a hint of doubt in his temperament, "I don't look like a military man, wearing a green robe, like a book reader." "A book reader?" A flash of doubt came to light in Xiao Yuchen's eyes. "Where are the readers in this border area?" But he still snatched his hand. "Let him come in." The account was open and a thin man walked in. He was wearing a simple green robe, his hair was casually tied behind his brain, and he had a faint smile on his face. He looked only over 20 years old, but he had a calm and unspeakable temperament. Yuchen looked at him and spoke in a hurry. This slim eye, clear eyes, and deep, as if it is hidden in countless secrets. He thought he told himself that this man was absolutely unsimplified. "Who are you? What's your purpose when you come here late at night?" Yuchen said in a cold voice, holding a silk quiz. The guard Changqing smiled, not caring about his indifference, and said quietly, "The grassroots are just a man from the mountains and fields. I heard that His Highness will fight against the rebels in the border areas and come to help." "Help?" Yuchen sneered, "I don't lack manpower in this business, nor do I need any help from people from all over the country. If you have nothing else, please come back." The guard was not worried, but smiled, took out a roll of bamboo slips from his sleeve, and placed them lightly on the table. "Your Highness might as well take a look at this first, and then decide whether the help of the people is needed." Yuchen's eyebrows were met with a simplified look, and his face changed slightly. "This is a detailed defense map of the rebels, and even their grass storage locations and patrol routes are clearly marked. Even his scout couldn't figure out this information clearly. How did this person get it? Where did you get these?" Yuchen raised his head and stared at the guard Changjing with a sharp look. The guards heard the voice and wrote lightly, "But they are some small means, not worth mentioning. If your Highness thinks it is useful, the people of the people will be willing to stay and help you. If your Highness does not believe it, the people of the people will tell you." Su Yuchen was silent for a moment, and finally said calmly, "What do you want?" "The people do not seek fame and fortune, but only seek to achieve their strength." The guard Changqing's eyes flashed brightly, "Your Highness's Emperor's trial has just begun. If you can have a scholar's help, the road ahead may be easier." Yuchen stared at him for a long time, and finally said a little, "Okay, stay. But I warn you, if I find that you are a little unhappy, I will never be merciless." The guard Changqing smiled and bowed, "Don't worry, Your Highness, the people will definitely not be entrusted." With the long-term news, Yuchen summoned several confidants to develop a grand plan. He decided not to wait for the rebels to take the initiative to attack, but to steal their grass storage points while the night was falling. As long as their grass is burned, the rebels will defeat themselves without any attack, and no matter how strong the battle is, they will have to retreat with a tight stomach. "Your Highness, is this too risky, right?" After hearing the plan, Jishan couldn't help but open his mouth. "We are not enough. If we fail secretly, the consequences will be unbelievable." "Failed?" Xiao Yuchen smiled coldly, "Zishan, you have been with me for so many years. When did you see me doing something I was unsure of? If you don't fight this battle, you have to win." The guard Changqing listened quietly on the side, with a flash of praise in his eyes. He never expected that this prince, who was only 18 years old, would be so decisive. It seems that he chose the right person when he went down the mountain this time. The night became increasingly heavy, and the bonfires in the campground were gradually extinguishing, and soldiers conveyed orders in a low voice to prepare for departure. Yuchen, the son of the emperor, quietly left the camp with 300 elites, and touched the rebel grass storage point. The guardian will stay in the operation and will be responsible for sitting behind the town, and will be subject to emergencies at any time. The yellow sand was everywhere, and the night wind was wailing. With the protection of the terrain, Yuchen and his group quietly approached their target without any noise. Their goal is a low-key manner. According to the long-term information, the rebel grass was hidden there, and there were no more than 100 people. As long as they were moving quickly, they could catch them off guard. "Your Highness, that's right in front of you." The scout who was leading the way said in a low voice, pointing to the few top tents that were not far away. Yuchen pointed the head and ordered in a low voice, "Divide it into 3 teams, encircle left and right, and burst into the middle. Remember, the movement should be fast, and retreat immediately after burning the grass, without any war. The soldiers should be silent and quickly dispersed. Xiao Yuchen pulled out the long sword from his waist, and a cold light flashed in his eyes. He knew that this battle was not only the first step in the emperor's attempt, but also the key to establishing his authority on the border. If he succeeds, he will be able to keep those who look down on him. If he fails, he will probably have his life under this piece of sand. Run! With his low voice, the three teams rushed at the same time, and the arrows were like rain, instantly breaking the quietness of the night. The rebel guards did not react at all and were beaten to pieces. The grass tent quickly ignited a raging fire, and the flames reflected half of the sky. Retreat! Xiao Yuchen killed a rebel leader who was trying to resist, and he suddenly ordered his retreat. The soldiers quickly gathered and retreated to the road with several injured companions. However, just as they were about to leave the battlefield, a rapid horse hoof sound suddenly came from the distance. No, it's the rebel's rider. Zishan was shocked and turned to look at Xiao Yuchen. Your Highness, we have to leave quickly, otherwise we will be covered. Yuchen gritted his teeth and glanced at the soldiers behind him. They were exhausted. If they were caught up by the stalkers at this time, they would definitely be a detachment without any military defeat. But he also knew that if they did not delay this helping soldiers, they would not have the chance to retreat. Zishan, you take the people first, I'll stop. Yuchen said in a deep voice, holding the long sword in his hand tightly, and a sense of determination ignited in his eyes. Your Highness, how can this work? Zishan was anxious and wanted to take action again, but was stared back by Xiao Yuchen. This is an order. Yuchen shouted softly, and turned around and brought dozens of soldiers to the chase. He knew that the success of this battle was at this moment. And he will never let himself take this first step. The sound of horse hooves is getting closer and closer, Huangsha is trampled and flying, and the sound of the rebels' killings is rumbling in the night sky. Yuchen stood in front, the long sword pointed at the enemy, and sneered at the corner of his mouth. Come on, let me see how capable you are. The night wind was like a knife, and the yellow sand was everywhere. Yuchen stood on a small high ground, holding his arms tightly, and his eyes coldly locked the rebels who were getting closer and closer in front of him. Although the soldiers behind him were tired, they all bit their teeth and were ready to fight desperately at any time with their weapons. They knew that this battle was not only about their own lives, but also about His Highness's Emperor's imperial test, and they could not afford it. Your Highness, there are at least 200 soldiers, we only have a few dozen of them. I'm afraid it won't work hard. A humble reminder, with a clear tightness in the sound. Yuchen didn't turn around, but just hummed coldly, fight hard? Who said I'm going to fight hard? Tell brothers, spread out and lead them into the pile of chaotic stones. His eyes swept over a low terrain filled with gravel, and the flying plate in his brain was counting on the countermeasures. The rebels were crowded and fast, but the terrain was complex, so the advantages of horses could not be revealed. As long as they can lead them in and delay time by terrain, they can safely withdraw their capital. After hearing the order, the servants were still a little nervous, but they quickly scattered and retreated towards the direction of the. The rebels saw them running away in scattered ways, and a big Han slap in the head danced with a horse sword, shouting, "Little bastards, can you run away? Chase me and kill them." The sound of horse hooves shook the sky, and the soldiers rushed over like wolves, and the yellow sand was trampled and dancing all over the sky. Yuchen deliberately slowed down and retreated with several guards in the most eye-catching position to attract the attention of the rebels. He slapped the flying arrows and said to the people beside him, "Don't fight, remember, just lead them in." Finally, the rebel soldiers were irritated and all chased into the pile of stones. The horse was blocked from moving in the gravel, and its speed slowed down and its team became dispersed. When Yuchen saw the scene, a cold light flashed in his eyes and shouted softly, "Run!" The soldiers who were ambushing the pile of rocks immediately launched a counterattack. The archers shot arrows from a high place, and the long spearmen took advantage of the trouble to kill the single-handed soldiers. For a while, the rebels were caught off guard and shouts came one after another. "That's dead, it's an ambush." The leader's big Han roared and tried to reorganize the team, but the terrain was too narrow and the horses could not be used at all, so the team formed a group. Xiao Yuchen took the opportunity to move forward, and the long sword pointed directly at the throat of Dahan. The sword light flashed, and blood rose, and the Dahan should fall to the ground. "He is dead, retreat quickly." The rebel soldiers saw that the leader was killed, and their military power plummeted. They tried to escape, but it was difficult to retreat in the pile of rocks. Those who ran slowly were solved by the soldiers. Yuchen stood on a large stone, covered in blood, and looked coldly as the dead soldiers fled, and finally the eldest son let out a breath. "Your Highness, we win," a nobleman shouted happily, his face full of joy after the disaster. "Please?" Yuchen sneered and snatched his head. "This is the beginning. Go back." He turned around and quickly withdrew with the man, heading towards the direction of the camp. Although this small battle was fought, the main force of the rebels was still there, and the news that the grass was burned would soon be revealed. They would definitely jump into the wall in a hurry, and the next battle would only be more difficult. When we returned to the camp, it was already dawning, and the Iron Mountains took most of the team back one step earlier, waiting for the news anxiously. Seeing that Yuchen came back safely, he finally let go of his heart and grinned, "Your Highness, you are so good." He burned their grass and slaughtered their troop leaders. The rebels are unable to kill this. Yuchen ignored his flattery and walked straight into the account. The guard Chang Jing was sitting in front of the desk, holding a roll of bamboo slips in his hand. Seeing him come in, he raised his head and smiled, "Your Highness has a good method, this battle is beautiful." "Beautiful?" Yuchen took off his bloody wind and threw it aside, his voice coldly, "Mr. Guard, if it weren't for your information, I might not win this battle. Let's say, what should I do next? The rebel grass is gone, and I will definitely be alone. We can't hold on for a few days with this hand." Guard Changfeng put down the bamboo slips, stood up slowly, walked to the map, pointed to a valley, and said, "Your Highness, the rebel grass is burned and cannot be supplemented within a short time. It will inevitably attack the Black Stone Core. Try to seize the back of the supplement line. But the Black Stone Core is difficult to defend and difficult to attack. As long as we hold it for 3 days, they will inevitably collapse inside and will not fight automatically." 3 days. Yuchen looked over the map, "It's so easy to say, but my men may not be able to withstand the attacks all night. Mr. Gun, is there any other way?" The guard Changqing smiled, with a deep meaning in his eyes, "Of course there are ways, but your Highness needs to go to the Lin family on his own. The Lin family has been guarding the town for generations and has elite troops under his command. If they can convince them to send troops to help, the rebels will be insufficient." "Lin family?" Yuchen raised his eyebrows, and some news appeared in the sea of brain. The Lin family was a large family in the border area, and was loyal to the Great Yan Dynasty for generations. However, they also shocked the emperor because of their great achievements and had a close relationship with the Chinese government. What made him, a prince who was not favored, let the Lin family sell this face? Your Highness does not need to be too much. Although Lin Zhentian, the head of the Lin family, is very strong, he values loyalty the most. As long as you treat each other with kindness, justify them, and move them with emotions, you will definitely be able to convince him. The polite and calm words seemed to have already settled everything. Yuchen was silent for a moment, and finally said, "Okay, I believe you. I'll prepare horses, I'll go to the Lin family by myself." 2 days later, Yuchen brought a small team to the Iron Cloud Fort where the Lin family was located. This fortress is built among the mountains, easy to defend and difficult to attack. The city wall is full of traces left by swords, which obviously has been through countless war fire washing. Xiao saw them in his group, stood there and asked, "Who is coming?" "Report the name." "I am the 5th prince of the dynasty, Yuchen, who came to pay homage to Mr. Lin." Yuchen turned over and said with a loud voice, his eyes were straight at guard, and he did not retreat at all. Shouwei heard the word prince and was stunned for a moment, and someone rushed into the room to report. Not long after, a young woman in military clothes walked out of the fort, with a strong aura, wearing a long knife around her waist, and looking at Xiao Yuchen with a sharp look. "Are you the fifth prince? What do you want to see your father?" Xiao Yuchen was slightly stunned. Unexpectedly, it was not Lin Zhentian who greeted him, but a woman. But he quickly returned to his senses and bowed. "When I was ordered to suppress the rebels in the border areas, I came to ask Mr. Lin for help. This matter is related to the safety of the border, so please call the lady for a briefing." The woman snorted coldly, looked him up and down, and her words were filled with disdain. "Taiwan's rebels? Just hate you so many people? The fifth prince, the border is not a capital city, and it doesn't work by verbalizing. My father is discussing things, and he has no time to see you. If you have anything to say, it will be the same for me." Yuchen had a slight eyebrows, but he said patiently, "It's not just a verbal word. The rebel grass has been destroyed by me. Now he is ready to attack the Black Stone Core. If the gate is lost, the Iron Cloud Fort will be unable to be self-reliant. The Lin family has been loyal for generations, so how can they be watched as the surroundings are scattered?" When the woman heard this, her face changed slightly. After a moment of silence, she finally said, "Okay, I am Lin Ruoshi, my father's eldest daughter. You come in with me, but you are so angry. If you can't tell me that it's because of this, don't blame me for not giving face." Yuchen pointed at the head and followed Lin Ruoshi into the Iron Cloud Fort. There were patrol soldiers from all over the fort, and the atmosphere was in full swing, and it was obvious that they were ready to fight at any time. When he arrived at the meeting hall, an old man with white hair and energy was sitting in the main seat, looking at Lu Yuchen coming in with a torch. "Old husband Lin Zhentian, see the fifth prince." The old man's voice was low, and he felt a sense of powerlessness without anger. "Here Ruoshi, your prince burned the rebel grass? Is this true?" Yuchen bowed his hand and said in a deep voice, "It's true and true. If the rebel grass is destroyed, the dog will jump into the wall in a hurry. If the Black Stone Core is lost, the Iron Cloud Fort will also become their next goal. Here, I am asking for help with sincerity. I hope that the veterans will be concerned about the safety of the people and help me." Lin Zhentian heard it, was silent for a moment, his eyes stayed on Yuchen for a long time, and finally said, "Your Highness is so young, and he has such a deep impression. I admire you. But the Lin family has been loyal to the Yen for generations and never competed with the royal family. The emperor's attempt to make a living is your Highness's private matter. If I send troops, it will be difficult to lose the population." Yuchen's heart sank, but his face did not show any voice. He continued, "The army is so serious. This matter is not about the trial, but about the safety of the people. If the rebels succeed, the people in the border will be filled with energy. The Lin family has been guarding each other for generations. How can they bear to see this situation?" Lin Zhentian had not opened his mouth yet, and Lin Ruoshi, who was beside him, sneered, "Fifth prince, you are beautiful, but you have only 1,000 people under your command, and even the Black Stone Core may not be able to defend it. Why can we let the Lin family compete with you in this game?" Yuchen turned his head to look at her, his eyes calm and calm. "Miss Lin, you never look at the battleground, but only to see if you can win. Since I dare to come, I will be sure to defend the Black Stone. But the premise is that the Lin family is willing to help me. If the Lin family does not take action, at most I will be able to fight to death on the sand field, but who will protect the lives of the people?" As soon as this happened, there was a silence in the hall. Lin Zhentian finally heard a long voice and stood up and said, "What a battle to kill the sand. I have lived most of my sons and respected the bloody sons the most. Your Highness, if you can really keep the Black Stone Guard for 3 days, I will send troops to help you." "What? 3 days?" A flash of light flashed in Xiao Yuchen's eyes and said, "Okay, I'll make sure." When leaving the Iron Cloud Fort, Lin Ruoshi sent him to the door, and his language was still filled with some doubts. "Fifth Prince, are you really sure to hold on for 3 days? Don't waste your life in vain, as we, the Lin family, will also fall." Yuchen turned his head and looked at her, and sneered, "Miss Lin, if I don't have such skills, why would I ask about the Emperor's trial? 3 days later, I will wait for your Lin family's Iron Rider in Blackstone. After returning to the site of business, Yuchen immediately summoned everyone to prepare for the matters. The guard Changqing heard the conditions of the Lin family and smiled. Your Highness, Lin Zhentian, the old fox, is examining you on the surface, but in fact he wants to sit in the mountain to watch the tiger fight. However, we may not be able to defend it for 3 days. Do you have a way? Yuchen raised his eyebrows and looked at the guard Changqing. Looking at the head, I took out a picture from my sleeve, which painted the terrain around the Black Stone. There are many rebels, but there are not enough grass, and the military is unstable. We just need to attack with defense, set up a few traps, and delay their attacks, and there will be plenty of time for 3 days. Yuchen looked at the picture, and his eyes flashed with a gleam. Okay, just follow what you said. Iron Mountain, send orders, the entire army prepares, moves the stone head, digs a trap, and turn the black stone gate into an iron bucket. In the next 2 days, the rebels did as expected, as Guardian expected, launching several strong attacks, but were dragged down by the terrain and traps of the black stone, causing great damage. Yuchen, who came up to the front, held the soldiers to guard the wards. Although he was exhausted, he did not let the rebels take any further steps. Early in the morning of the 3rd day, a sudden rush of horse hooves came from the outside. Yuchen stood on the wall and looked away. He saw a team of iron gallops running from a distance, with the word Lin written on the flag. The corners of his mouth slightly raised, knowing that the Lin family had finally arrived. Lin Ruoshi came to the bottom of the house and raised her head to look at the blood-stained Xiao Yuchen, with a flash of surprise in her eyes. 5th Prince, I didn't expect you to have been there for 3 days. My father said, and he never went back on his word since his promise came out. From now on, the Lin family's Iron Ride will hear you being ordered. Yuchen pointed at the head, his voice was low and powerful. Okay, with the help of the Lin family, this will help the rebels, and it will be difficult to fly. With the addition of Lin family Iron Rider, the battle turned back in an instant. Yuchen led the army to attack and fought against the rebels. The iron galloped like a wind and could not be defeated. The rebel soldiers collapsed and soon they could not become soldiers. In this battle, Yuchen not only successfully rebelled, but also established a great reputation in the border areas. The emperor's first priority in trying to survive. However, after the battle ended, the guard found him with a serious expression. Your Highness, although the rebels are defeated, the pushers behind them have not yet surfaced. I have received the news that someone in the capital secretly communicated with the news, and even tried to find the next link, which has already set a bigger trap. Yuchen heard it, his eyes turned cold, and he clenched his fists. Are you saying, my good brother? The polite and singed in a low voice, the eldest prince, Xianting, has long seen the eyes of His Highness. The next thing to the test is the court's authority. If your Highness is not careful, he may be worried about his life. Yuchen sneered, and a cold light ignited in his eyes. Life worries? Okay, I want to see what kind of flowers he can play. Mr. Guard, prepare for it, we will return to Beijing. The wind and sand stopped, and the war in the borders subsided calmed down, but the greater storm was quietly rolling in the capital. Xiao Yuchen knew that the emperor had tried to walk on a long road, and he would never fall down on this road. The sky in the capital was dusty, and the heavy clouds were so stressful that people couldn't breathe. Xiao Yuchen stood on the platform outside the palace, wearing a dark red war robe, and the wind blew the keys of the clothes. His face was still covered with rough marks left by the wind and sand, but his eyes were sharper than ever, as if they could pierce this golden palace and reach the deepest silence and darkness. It took 3 months since I returned to the capital from the border to the capital. The last part of the emperor's trial, the test of the ancestor's spirit, finally arrived. This test not only tests force, but also tests mind and atmosphere. The hero will wear a dragon crown and become the new emperor of the Great Yan Dynasty. The defeated will be erased everything and will not even be left in the history. The guest beside him was wearing the green robe as always, holding a roll of bamboo in his hand, and a faint smile on his face. He said in a low voice, Your Highness, today is the last battle. The test of the ancestors' spirit is on the surface an examination of the princes, but in fact it is a decision of the dynasty's fortune. Your dispute with the eldest Prince Xianting is no longer a personal grudge, but a fate of the entire Yan. Yuchen hummed coldly, and his eyes swept over another high platform far away. There was Yu Xianting standing there, wearing a golden dragon robe, with a hurried sneer on his face that he was determined to win. Next to him was his chief scholar Wei Zixi. The guy's face was sunken and his eyes were wandering like a poisonous snake. It was obvious that he was tying up some tricks. Yuchen clamped his fists tightly and said in a low voice, "Mr. Guard, I don't care whether I am angry or not. Today, I just want that guy to know who is the real emperor of the dragon." The consultant Changqing smiled and said nothing more, just lightly stepped aside. Below the stage, Lin Ruoshi was guarding a distance with several Lin family iron gallops. She was wearing military clothes and a sword on her waist, and looked at Qin Yuchen with a steady look, as if she was ready to slam him at any time. Yuchen pointed her slightly, as a greeting. Then he turned around, walked down the platform, and walked towards the ancestors' fortress deep in the imperial tomb where he was trying. The imperial tomb is located in the northern suburbs of the capital. It is a forbidden area. Normally, no royal family members are allowed to enter without permission. Only the last connection that the emperor tries to do will be opened. Su Yuchen and Su Xianting stepped into the tomb road one after another. There were more than 10 steps between the two. No one said anything, but the perplexing murder in the air was so full that it could not be transformed. The stone walls on both sides of the mausoleum road are carved with the achievements of the emperor of the Great Yan Dynasty. Under the light of torches, the statues seem to have come alive, and they examine these two princes who are about to decide the consequences with cold eyes. "Fifth brother, I didn't expect you to really get to this point." Su Xianting finally opened his mouth, his voice was low, and he mocked him, "The helping waste in the border area can't kill you, and the old men in the court can't hold you down, but I looked at you with admiration. However, after all, you are not that good at dealing with me today." Yuchen stopped walking and turned to look at him coldly. "Brother, you have every effort to send assassins, connect with rebels, and even the test links have moved your hands, but am I alive well? Today's battle, let's see who can laugh to the end." Zi Xianting sneered and said nothing more, speeding up his pace towards the sacrificial supreme. Su Yuchen was not willing to be outdone and followed suit. The two soon arrived at the deepest part of the imperial tomb. A huge black stone fort appeared in front of them. The fort was carved with ancient runes, and there were circles of stone pillars around them. Each stone pillar was carved with a dragon, which was lifelike, as if it would rise up in the sky at any time. In the middle of the fortress, a group of dark blue flames ignited quietly, emitting a biting chill, like a soul that could suck people. "The spirit of the ancestor." Yuchen murmured in a low voice, his eyes locked in the flames. He had heard countless sayings that this flame was transformed by the will of the great flame emperor, and could see through everything. Only the true emperor of True Dragon could obtain its recognition. Otherwise, no matter how powerful a person, touching this flame would be swallowed up. Su Xianting stood in front of the fort, turned his head and looked at Su Yuchen, with a flash of coldness in his eyes. "Fifth brother, you also know the rules of trying to do so. We step into the flames at the same time. Whoever can get the recognition of the spirit of the ancestors, who is the new emperor. If you are afraid, it is still time to withdraw now, so as not to lose your life." "Scared?" Zi Yuchen sneered, and stepped forward, standing shoulder to shoulder with Zi Xianting. "Brother, don't say anything, come." The two of them stepped into the flames at the same time, and in an instant, a biting chill broke out from the bottom of their feet, as if countless ice bulbs pierced into the bone marrow. Yuchen bit his teeth tightly, endured the pain, and stared at the blue flames in the group. However, the flames did not directly devour them as they were said, but instead ascended the trench and turned into two illusory dragon shadows, lying on the two people. The test of the true dragon begins with the heart and finally with life. A low and ancient voice roared over the fort, as if it had been transmitted from 1,000 years ago, carrying the supreme dignity. Who can bear the great heir and who can bear the responsibility of the emperor, as evidenced by blood and soul? As the voice fell, the two dragon shadows suddenly roared, turning into countless light blades, and snatching towards Yuchen and Xianting. Yuchen reacted very quickly and pulled out his long sword from his waist. The sword light flashed and shattered several light blades that came towards him, but more light blades came with them, so fast that they could hardly see the spine clearly. He could only use his instinct to avoid it, and a few blood marks were quickly drawn out of his body. Zi Xuanting's situation is not much better. Although his cultivation is not weak, his attack on Longing is also a bit wolfish. He gritted his teeth and growled, "Is this the test of the ancestor's spirit?" But it was just a few silly voices that were slammed. However, before his words were finished, a dragon shadow suddenly accelerated and turned into a ray of thunder that hit his chest. Xianting was shocked and hurriedly avoided the side, but was still rubbed against his shoulders, and the blood fog sprayed. The whole person was beaten to fly several steps and fell hard on the edge of the stone turret. He covered his wounds and his face was blue. He obviously didn't expect this exam to be so successful. When Yuchen saw the scene, a cold light flashed in his eyes. He knew that this was not only a test of force, but also a test of will. The spirit of the ancestors seems to be able to see people's hearts. If the mind is retrenched or feared, the attack will be doubled. He took a deep breath, pressed the blood that was pouring in his lower body, held the long sword tightly, and took the initiative to face Longing. "Come on, I'm Yuchen, I never recognize it." Longing seemed to feel his fighting intention, and his attack became more violent, but the more he fought, the more courageous he became. Every sword was determined to go all the way. In the future, Longing's attack began to weaken, and several light blades even spiraled around him, as if they recognized his courage. When he looked at Xianting, although he was struggling, there was a little panic in his eyes and his actions became slower and slower, and he was obviously in a state of uneasy. "Impossible, I am the true Dragon Emperor." Zi Xianting roared angrily, and a blood light burst out from the long knife in his hand, trying to resist Longing's attack, but this shot seemed to have angered the spirit of the ancestors. Longing roared and turned into a huge thunder that would swallow him up. Zi Xianting let out a cry, and the whole person was beaten out of the stone turf and fell heavily to the ground, not knowing life and death. Yuchen saw the scene, gasping heavily, and turned to look at the group of blue flames. At this moment, the flames rose slowly and turned into a huge dragon-shaped shadow, which swung above him, making a low dragon-mouthed sound. The ancient voice echoed again, "The real dragon has already appeared, and the heir is one. He has inherited the fate of Dian and guarded the world's basic career." As the sound fell, the dragon shadow turned into a golden light and merged into the body of Yuchen. He could only feel a powerful force rising from the bottom of his heart, as if the entire Great Yan Dynasty's atmosphere was gathered in him. The wound on his body quickly became tiring, his fatigue was empty, and even his spirit became extremely clear. He looked down at his hands, and sneered at the corner of his mouth, "It's over." He turned around and walked out of the stone throne, but he saw that Zi Xianting was still lying on the ground. Although he was not dead, his breath was weak and he had obviously lost his qualification to fight for the throne. Su Yuchen looked at him coldly, and without saying anything, he walked straight outside the tomb road. The moment he stepped out of the imperial tomb, the sun was on his body, and the people in the audience knelt down and shouted loudly, "Welcome to the new emperor. My emperor is thousands of years old." Yuchen stood on the high platform, glanced at the ministers and soldiers below the stage, and finally let out a breath of air. From the border to the capital, from the battlefield to the court, he walked all the way, living and dying, and finally standing in this supreme position. He turned his head to look at Guard Chang and said in a low voice, "Mr. Guard, today's victory has given you more. From now on, you will be my master of Dian, and you will defend this country with me." The Guard Changqing smiled and bowed, "Your Highness is so serious, but the people have done their duty." But as soon as he turned, his face suddenly became solemn, "Your Highness, although the Emperor's trial has ended, the crisis of Dian has not been lifted. the prophecy left by the emperor who opened the country that year said that the day when the Emperor Xianlong ascended the throne was the time for the celestial phenomena to change. The people were watching the celestial phenomena, and there were strange stars falling in the north, and there might be a big battle. Yuchen glanced at the head and said in a deep voice, "Are you saying that there is even greater nuisance?" The guard was very proud and his voice was low. "Your Highness, the Emperor's dominance is never a final point, but a new beginning. Beyond the northern border, there is a force that is quietly rising. They believe in different religions, manipulate different animals, and can even affect the celestial phenomena. If you don't take precautions early, you may become a major concern for Dian." Yuchen was silent for a moment, his eyes turned to the sky far away, and a cold light flashed in his eyes. "Okay, since I have put on the dragon crown, I will guard this country. Mr. Gu, send orders, call on the sidelines to strengthen the northern defense line. I want to see what kind of ability this helps the guy has to dare to play wild on my big flame ground. Take a long and clean head, retreat to the side and start the arrangement." Lin Ruoshi walked forward, with a smile on her tongue. "Your Highness, you will face such trouble as soon as you ascend the throne. Why don't you first stabilize the court and then consider the problems in the north?" Yuchen shook his head and smiled coldly. "Ruoshi, the Emperor's road has never been stable. I have my own way to deal with the old men in the court. As for the north, Dian, establishing the country with military force, if I can't even deal with this challenge, what are you talking about in the world of the world?" Lin Ruoshi saw that he had decided, so he didn't say anything more, but said, "Okay, the Lin family's Iron Rider will hear his life at any time. If your Highness needs it, he will be dispatched at any time." Yuchen pointed at the head and his eyes turned far away again. At this moment, the sound of the clock in the imperial palace was rising, long and low, as if indicating that a new journey was about to begin. He knew that the end of the Emperor's trial was just the beginning of another even more cruel battle. And he would never let this country be sent to him. As the sun sets, the shadow of the palace pulls the eldest. Yuchen stands on the platform, blowing over his war robe, and making a low voice. His back looked particularly lonely under the sun, but it was incredible. Along the sky, a dark red cloud layer gathered quietly, like some ominous sign, approaching quietly.